This is Jaclyn from Longarming by Jaclyn, and we are on to week 2 of our Joy Sewing series. And I have used so much scrap from the first couple of runs to this that I am cheating, and I am going to be using some layer cake squares for this. So don't think that you have to have some sort of fussily coordinated grouping of fabrics. Be scrappy, be wild. There's a breaking point in the chaos. If you are too structured and then you put a random fabric in that doesn't fit with that grouping, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And then, so you have like 1 or 2 colors, easy to coordinate, adding a few more colors. There's a tipping point where it's like not chaotic enough to be fully scrappy. So it just looks like a few things don't fit. And then you bridge the gap, and then you get into fully scrappy. And once you've gone like completely chaotic, full Jackson Pollock, then anything goes and no rules. So in my opinion, it is best to start fully chaotic, and you can always pull back from that. But if you start too restrained and too trying to like match and coordinate your colors, you don't want to land in that middle zone where it's like, okay, you were going with this color palette, what's this random thing here? So fully commit, fully lean in to the scrappy, wild, anything goes. So this week we are doing improv curves, and there's a couple of techniques, and I will demonstrate on these layer cakes and cut in some of what we did at our piecing party, and you'll get the idea. So it's a technique you can play with and use on anything. Okay, so for the first technique, you're going to take 2 fabrics with a little bit of contrast from each other and stack them right sides up. And it is easier if your scraps are the same outside size. They don't have to be necessarily a square, but if you just take your rotary cutter and clean up the edges, it becomes easier to match the curves and have a reference point for the beginning and the ending. So you can just stack up 2 random, a little bit larger scraps, take a straight edge, and just make straight sides. It doesn't have to be a square, it doesn't have to be right angles, none of that matters, but having a nice straight reference point. So we're going to start with the first basic cut, and with them face up, tossing basically a vertical-ish, we're going to cut ourselves a random curve. You're not going to want this to be too sharp, so not too much curve, just a nice, smooth, random curve. And it looks like I have a few threads here. Let's see where they are. Right here. Okay, and then you take your left Twix and your right Twix, and there is your first improv curve block. And now we'll just fold that over, and you will notice I only want the 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm only worrying about exactly where my needle is. So don't get flustered trying to line up this whole thing at once. Just start. Take a few stitches. You can bend the upper fabric. Usually I find that the inside curve, so this lower piece of fabric is doing an outside curve, this upper piece that matches is doing an inside curve. You can fold that back. Try not to introduce any bias stretch by pulling along all of this is bias because you've cut a curve, so it's certainly not along the straight grain, but you can fold it back, sort of pivot it without stretching, and gently feed that under the presser foot. And for this, normally we eyeball our seam allowance a little bit out ahead, just like you do in driving. You don't look straight down at your wheels. You're looking out ahead on the road. For this technique, you want to go slowly and kind of look exactly where you are. This is more like parallel parking as it compares to driving. So I want to meet up and feed that under, and I'm only concerned about having that nice perfect 1/4 inch together right under the needle. Work a bite at a time. Press the fabric over or pivot it. And don't worry about what this is looking like. It's just a few stitches at a time, gently working that fabric into place right as it slides under the needle. And it's just an improv sampler. If it's not perfect, don't worry too much. So because your cut did not exit the fabric exactly at 90 degrees, one of the points between the edge of the fabric and the cut is going to be pointier, and one of the cuts is going to be more obtuse. So your pointier cut, just like when you're doing angled piecing that's not a square at 90 degrees, your pointier side will stick out a little bit. And when you open this up, do not panic. It's going to look a little bit rumpledy. I promise you, give this a good working over at your pressing station, and it's going to turn out beautiful. And you will be amazed how something rumpledy looking that you think there's just no way, with a little bit of patience and time at your pressing station, will smooth right out. It'd be nice if my iron were already hot. And if your curve was not perfect, you can lay it down nice and flat with your iron, and it'll work out just beautifully. Okay, so after stitching those down and giving them a good pressing, here are our improv curves. So these two are left and right twists of each other. So do give yourself a little bit of room around the edges when you're cutting those curves. You might want to not want to go all the way too close to the edge, so that you have plenty of room to square up your blocks and trim them and sort of just neaten the edges later on down the road when we get to that point. But for now, play with curves. If you don't like the curve that you made, press it a little bit. I'm sure it will look great. If you still don't like it, put it aside. We might visit that later. See, he looked like a pleat, but he pressed right out. And just put it aside. So another one. So no seam ripping, no judging yourself. The more you work those delicate bias edges, the more of a lost cause it's going to be anyways. So sew one. This is low stakes. You don't have to have the exact amount of fabric that you have sewn into the exact curve. So just play with it. Remember, we're exploring curves. So play with another one. Try it again, try it again, try it again. By your third one, you will be a curvalicious pro. All right, thanks for joining this Top 5 Friday series, Joy Sewing. This has been our second block. So tune in next week to find out what our third block is going to be. And I hope you're sewing along. I hope you're having a fun time with this. If you post your progress on the interwebs, I would love for you to use the hashtag Longarming by Jaclyn or LBJ_joy sewing. And those are the hashtags I would love so that I can find your work online and I can see your progress. And I'd love to know which blocks you love, which techniques have made you feel more powerful and adventurous and got you sewing up your scraps. This is a much faster block to whip out than crumb piecing. If you see weird references, this was going to be all one video at one point, and now we've divided it into chunks. This is too long. I need to edit this way down. You don't have to make that much. You can work on this 10 or 15 minutes a week if you want. You can accumulate your pieces and your crumbs as much as you want. I do have some crumbs that didn't make it into the blocks and went back into the scrap bin, and I'm just not going to use them. You could keep going and keep going and keep going with crumbs until you lose your mind. So you do have to call it a point where certain scraps are so small you say, I'm throwing those away, or you're tired of it and say, I'm calling it here. These blocks are done, because you could crumb piece yourself into oblivion as well. Okay. Enjoy your week. This was a long one. I went over way too much stuff. We'll have to edit this way down and speed up a lot of footage just to make it halfway, kind of, sort of, anything anybody's gonna watch. This has been Jaclyn from Longarming by Jaclyn. Happy Top 5 Friday. And I'm really curious to see what's on your sewing table. So send me your images. I really want to know. Maybe it'll get shared on the channel. Maybe they'll get shared on my social. I think it's really important for us to build community and congratulate each other. So have a great day. Bye.